How effective are awareness campaigns when it comes to messaging in the power sector? Can the ins and outs of the power sector be packaged into edutainment form? Can government policy be sold to the masses via entertainment and be effectively explained for the purpose of understanding? Well, our guest, Uade Ahimie, author and business advisor, joins us further to answer these questions. Uade, you're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me in the
Great
studio.
stuff, and happy Easter Monday.
It's always a pleasure being here.
Yeah, really, always a pleasure having you. How effective do you think the government's messaging has been with respect to the power sector and the challenges that Nigeria has been facing?
I do think that they could do more. And the reason being this, like I always tell you, I know I tell you this every time, and every time I start this conversation, I always tell you, electricity is not cheap. However, government must always try and balance the two aspects of electricity, which is commercial and social.
Yes.
And because of that, a lot of factors have to be put in place or considered towards ensuring that you do not discard the social aspect of electricity. Why? Because the more people that you have on the electrical grid that have power, the more economic possibilities and potentials that it creates just by having power. So we must balance those two things together. However, the one thing I think they can do is also start to educate the masses more about wastages in electricity, which is one area I see, whether it's government or the private sector, not doing so much in. Some generation companies, distribution companies are doing a bit of that, but there's a need to really focus on those kind of things. For instance, you leave your house, you leave the ACs on because there is no light, and then you come back. There's a whole lot of, and then when you're out, light is back, and then you have a whole lot of wastage. And all those things cost money. It costs strain on the infrastructure, points at those points whereby electricity could be given to someone else. It's just being wasted because there's nobody using it. So a lot of all these things have to be put into the total messaging to the masses. But like I say, and I always say, and I'll continue to say,
yes,
electricity is not cheap.
Right.
So you go anywhere in the world, electricity is expensive. But like I said, you must balance the commercial and the social aspect of electricity if you want economic growth in any country.
Fantastic. The Balancing Act, and also I guess when you talk about, even still on messaging, whose sole responsibility is it? Is it government or does the private sector play a role in that awareness?
It's everybody's role. So for people like me who have an idea about the electricity business, it's also a responsibility for us to always try and explain some of these intricacies to a lot of people. So let me give a typical example. I used to stay in an estate where I used to pay between 70 and 80 naira, depending on the cost of diesel, because we're using a hybrid system. And we had 24...
Per kilowatt hour?
Yeah, per kilowatt hour.
Right, okay.
And we were using a hybrid system.
End.
Oh, that's on the high end. But it was 24 hours.
Power.
Okay. So the first month I did that, I spent like 60K.
A month?
Oh, yes. The kids were on holiday, the ACs were on, whether they were in the room, the lights were on, everything was on. Yeah. I had my nephews, nieces in the house. So it was just, and at the end of the day, I just told myself, it can't happen anymore. So what do you do? How do you plan this thing? So those messages have to go out to the people. It's not just the companies or the discos or the gencos or the government. The likes of you, the likes of me, have to continually educate people on this. Like I said earlier, if you're not in the room, why is the light on?
Right.
I had a situation whereby kids would turn on the... I had a friend who complained that, he moved from one part of Lagos to another part, and all of a sudden, because he was staying in an estate that had a hybrid electricity generation provision system, he was paying... The first month, he paid 100,000 naira in electricity.
What? Goodness.
Yes.
Eyes must have popped out when you got that bill.
So now you start to manage electricity the way it's meant to be managed. Electricity is not cheap, but we must balance commercial and social. And the aspect that government is continually trying to do is balance that social aspect so that everybody who wants to be on the grid and who wants to have electricity, whether it's just one bulb or one fan or just a small fridge working, can have that and be satisfied that, we're paying for this, but we're sure that those who are actually consuming the electricity to generate the kind of revenues that you require are paying the right share too.
Great story. You've mentioned the kids. You mentioned holidays. This is interesting. All right, let's show this Warner Brothers images here. This is from the Looney Tunes show. That's Yosemite Sam, who decided to get off the grid by turning to solar power. So I think we have another image where I think he's yelling at his neighbors, Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny there. And there's another image where he has, I think, a pair of scissors. There he is. So he's cutting the lines now because he's proudly exiting the power grid. And I think the last one he's looking at, I think the next image here, he's going to be looking at the sun coming up and looking. Yeah, there it is. So there's the sun opening up his solar
powering his solar panel.
Powering his solar panels there, right? And then I think the things take a turn for the worse where there's a thunderstorm and
it rains forever.
It rains and then he's blocked out. So now, just for our viewers, there's actually the next, what we're going to take a look at is him going to his neighbor's house, that is Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and asking to use their microwave. Let's take a listen to that right now.
Pardon me, neighbors. I know I said I never needed nothing from nobody, but could I possibly use your microwave to heat my frozen dinner?
Don't get involved. He's standing right there.
Where's your microwave?
Oh, thank goodness. I mean, it's ready.
Okie dokie. Well, thanks, neighbors. Let's never do this again.
All right. What do you make of that? I mean, this is a cartoon that is talking about the detriment, or I guess the pluses and minuses of solar energy. So I guess, and the audience is children. I really want to get your thoughts.
So when I look at this, I see two things. Solar energy will give you power.
Yes.
However, there must be the right infrastructure, because solar energy, what it does is it generates power. So you have to have the right infrastructure to also distribute it and transmit it and distribute it. So with that, that's one part. The second part is this. It also serves, especially in Nigeria today, it serves a lot as backup power for the national power system.
Right.
And with that, it just continually shows us that there are huge opportunities, the partnerships that I see that can come about with the solar companies, with the electricity companies, with other infrastructure development people, so that you can harness those potentials. But the truth of the matter is, it is expensive. It is damn expensive. And once you consider those costs, then it might not be to the reach of each and every one of us. So you find out that there are a lot of solar panels across so many houses today. The amount of electricity being generated by Nigerians on their own, whether it's through their generator sets or these solar panels, it's so huge. So how do we harness those potentials into creating systems that would provide generation capacity for small areas, like what you call the captive markets that you need to feed into? At what cost will those things come? Who is willing to pay for it? So those analyses need to be done before you say, oh, let's get into solar power, and because it still has to go through a transmission and a distribution grid.
And so if we look at what it would take to make it scale across the nation, are we now talking subsidies again with respect to, I hate that word, but,
So do I. For me, it's about putting out the right policies to drive investments in these areas. And investments in solar power is going to be huge. Now, it's not just the investment in the solar powers that will generate the electricity, but it's investment across board, from generation to transmission to distribution, thereby ensuring that those who are willing to put monies into it, because the world is going to go electric very soon.
Right.
Europe, America, Asia, they're already talking about electric-powered things by 2030. When are we going to get into that? And for me, you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
You just need to be able to harness the information that is already available. How do you ensure that you put together a strategy that would enable people investing in this aspect of generation and provide it into the system? So are there off-grid systems that need to be put in place? Are there simple captive market transmission systems that you need to put in place towards working with the discos to ensure that they can both, there is a sharing arrangement for these things to happen. But I don't think government should subsidize it. Rather, what government should do is put in place the right policies to implement those things, give some form of incentives towards ensuring that subsidy in a way, but towards ensuring that the investments can come in. whether it's a short tax holiday towards ensuring that those investments can kick off and stabilize. And then you come back into the regular system of demand and supply working. But you must allow the forces of demand and supply run this business. And government should focus on creating those policies that will manage the social aspects of ensuring that power gets across to all of Nigeria.
Speaking of power getting across to all of Nigeria, the government, there was talk of the government possibly unbundling the Transmission Corporation of Nigeria, the TCM. What do you make of the concept of an ISO, an independent system operator?
So for me, because you want to ensure that the system is transparent, so bringing in an ISO where government sits as the regulator and oversees the system as a whole, sets out the policies and the rules and regulations, to ensure that these things work. They sit there. So what that does is it creates a proper exchange for electricity transfer. So at that point, everybody understands. And as you go on, you find out that you don't necessarily have to be within a particular area to buy electricity.
Right.
It's like using your ATM card. So we must grow into that space. And by doing that is ensuring that the ISO doesn't give undue advantages to any of the discos. And that's where government regulation really needs to hit hard. You set out those regulations, you implement them to the letter. Where people default, you make sure that they pay the penalties. You ensure that the ISO provides an enabling platform for all the users within that space. The generation companies will put the electricity into the market. The distribution companies will take it. Now, because of the current challenges we have, once the grids are being expanded, like I said, if you bring in the solar system, whether you're creating some form of captive transmission grids that would connect off the grid or onto the grid, all these things those investments must come in. But the regulation must be clear. It must be clear. Because if the regulation is not clear, then you have this kind of issues. And when people default on the regulations, let the penalties come hard on them. Because businessmen, they hate those things. They don't want to go facing government and facing tariffs and penalties, because not only does it create a huge risk for the brand, it could lead to so many other things, and consumers will tell you, I'm not going to do business with this company.
Thank you for that. Oniga, I think we're about 45, 60 seconds. Real quick, metering. I mean, TCN unbundling, that's one side. How important? I mean, I know they're working on it, but how important is it to get this in briefly, if you can, as far as metering? So
briefly on metering, what I see is the MAP program, fine. However, there's a cost element to it. So for me, personally, rather than getting the consumers to actually pay, because it's quite difficult. COVID has created a lot of economic uncertainty across the world. So for me, basically what I think in terms of subsidy is government should try and come in, provide these meters, and let the discos get the monies from them and pay back through taxes, through or any other form that the government wishes to have.
Uade Ahimie, business advisor and author. Thank you so much for taking us.
Thank you very much, Rotus, for having me on the show.
Great stuff.